raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna see in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I raise a hallelujah with everything inside of me. I raise a hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee. I raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. I raise a hallelujah. Fear, you lost your hold on me. I'm gonna see in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Sing a little louder. 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 Let's sing a little louder. Let's sing a little louder. Sing a little louder in the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. Heaven comes to fight for me. Sing a little louder in the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Let's sing a little louder. Heaven comes to fight for me. Sing a little louder. I'm gonna see in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the Comeback Culture. If you join us weekly on Districts, or maybe if you have heard it through the grapevine, some awesome news coming out of the phases from Maryland and the governor, and also from Emmanuel Church. We are reopening June 7th in our big main auditorium. Sadly, we are not able to have one youth on Sundays like we used to, but what we are going to do is reopen Districts. We're going to be having it at church, outside, where there's way more safety measures that we can take and things that we can do to help prevent any kind of spread of anything. So excited about that. So June 10th at 7 p.m. we're going to be starting our outdoor districts at the church. If you have any questions or anything, you can definitely contact me. I'll be more than happy to answer any of those things. But I wanted to get right into the message today. This story has so much history for me. This story has so much meaning to me because this is something that did help me transition from my old job into really being the youth pastor at Emmanuel Church. This is the story of Gideon, and if you want to open your Bibles or if you want to follow along on the screen, we have this fancy underlay or overlay, whatever it's called, in Judges chapter 6. We're going to be reading verses 6 through 12, and we're going to be hopping around through the story of literally one of my favorite all-time Bible characters, if you want to call him that, named Gideon. And it picks up like this, and we pick up with the Israelites messing up time and time again. And at this time, Midian was the country that was enslaving and attacking the Israelites day in and day out, taking their food, everything. And so we pick up in verse 6, and it says this: Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. And when the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." He's kind of getting fed up. He says, "I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of every single person that has oppressed you. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, but you have not listened to me." The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And so the title of my message today is Call Waiting ... If you have an iPhone and you're watching, or you have some type of phone, I'm sure that when you're on the phone with somebody, even though I know our culture, we don't like to be on the phone, we like to text. But a lot of times when I'm on the phone, my wife will call me or my mom will call me, and I'll take the phone off my ear and it'll literally say, "Call Waiting." And this message I thought was so impactful because this dictates and it depicted my life back then, and I think it's so relevant to what a comeback culture kind of looks like. Because we all have this certain calling, we all have this thing that we're being called to become, we all have this thing that we're called to be, and a lot of times we have the call and it is waiting. And so I have 3 points again, surprise for you guys, and it's going to go along with my life story, but it's also going to go along with exactly what Gideon is going through in this time. And so the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about today is when you have a call waiting, you can do a couple things. And for the first point is sometimes we send our call to voicemail. Sent to voicemail is the first point I want to talk to you guys about today. Is a lot of times when we come back and we're trying to establish a new culture, we're trying to establish what it looks like with the new normal, what it looks like with new beginnings. Sometimes we forget what we were called to. Sometimes we forget the progress that we were making before all this happened. Sometimes we forget the progress we made in the middle of the coronavirus, in the middle of the storm. And a lot of times it's because we pick up right where we left off. We pick up becoming busy. We pick up getting too much onto our plate, and we can't handle it all. And I know that this is the case for me, is that when I'm on the phone with somebody and the call comes in and it says call waiting, a lot of times I have to measure my priorities. I have to say, okay, is the person I'm talking to right now more important than the person on the other line where it says call waiting? But can I tell you something too? I hate talking on the phone, like almost more than anything. And so if I'm at home and I'm watching a TV show, or I'm watching a movie, or I'm playing video games, or I'm talking with Carly and somebody calls me, what I do sometimes, I measure my priorities. I measure what's the most important to me in that moment. I measure what I'm going to do with that call. And a lot of times I send it to voicemail. Can I tell you that is the case with a lot of us today? A lot of times we have this call that God is pushing us to or maybe pulling us through. And a lot of times we're like, God, that's great and all, but I still have school. God, that's great and all, but do you know that I need to make money in order to pay for my car, in order to pay for my gas? God, that's cool and all, but did you know that they hurt me, so I can't really forgive them? God is calling us to something, but it's up to us whether we are going to accept or decline, like my iPhone says. And so many times, the things that we have in our hands, they distract us so heavily. They occupy us from answering the very thing that could change our life for the positive. Why do we send things to voicemail? It's because we get so busy with what's in our hands and we say, man, this is the best thing for me right now. But God is saying, if you just drop what's in your hand and you take what I have for you, it could potentially change your life forever. And I remember sitting in my college graduation, having no idea what I was going to do. My uncle offered me a job, so I took it for the summer and I worked literally kind of filing papers all summer. And it was miserable. Like my uncle was a lawyer, so there was a ton of paperwork. And I remember sitting there, I was like, okay, this is 100% not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't want to be a filer for the rest of my life, and then that's it. And then in the fall, I got a job offer to work with the senior center. And remember, if you guys know my story at all, you guys know that I received my calling when I was a sophomore in college. So this is about 2 years later. I'm sitting here in a senior center helping people figure out what's broken with their cell phone when they have airplane mode on the cell phone, and that's the only thing wrong with it. And I was like, God, is this all you have for me? Is this the extent of your promise? Is this as good as it gets? But a lot of times I think that God has to work things out in us in order to get us to a place where we are ready to receive the blessing that he has for us. And so the next thing I want to bring up to you guys is when Gideon kind of hears from the angel. He's sitting there and he's saying, man, is this it? I'm hiding from the Midianites. I'm hiding, trying to be discreet. I'm trying to hide and do my job. But a lot of times he felt insignificant. He felt overlooked. It says in the Bible that he was the youngest in his family. And so he was doing the most dangerous job, because if the Midianites had found him, they literally would have just killed him. And I know a lot of times, like in our lives, maybe we're coming back and we feel insignificant. We feel unheard. We feel overlooked. But can I tell you something? That's part of the call. If you look in the Bible, you look at all the stories we talk about sometimes, God calls the people who nobody else is paying attention to. Moses had a stutter. Moses was a murderer. David was an adulterer. David came from the field when he was a shepherd. Like, there are so many people who seemed unqualified but fulfilled something greater than they could ever have done themselves, but they had to trust fully in God. And we see this right here in Gideon. And this brings me to my second point, but before I get to that, we're going to jump ahead to Judges 6, verse 25 through 28. And I jump down to the bottom of verse 25, and it says this: before you do anything, Gideon, you have to do something for me. You have to show God that you're invested. And this is sometimes something that we struggle with, because we want to hold on to things. We want to hold on to certain pieces of ourselves or certain aspects of our old life, when God has not called us to hold on. He has called us to let go, because when we let go, we can embrace everything that God has for us. And it says this: tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of that height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than in the daytime. He said, I'm not getting killed. I'm not doing it. So in the morning, when the people of the town got up, they were shocked, because there was Baal's altar demolished, obliterated, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull was sacrificed on the newly built altar. This is the second thing I want to tell you today, is that when the call is waiting, I want to tell you this, that the call requires destruction before creation. The call requires destruction before creation. We talk a lot about habits in one youth. We talk a lot about things that kind of shape us or that kind of build our foundation. Before this whole coronavirus was happening, we were actually in a series called Relationship Goals. And the reason we were getting into that is because the world has shaped relationships. They have shaped between parents and children, between romantic relationships, between men and women, and any other relationship in between those two things. They have taken them and they have destroyed them by morphing them into something that God did not create them to be. And we kind of see a similar situation here, is that anything that God creates to be good, anything that God creates to have fruit or be beneficial for anybody, sometimes the world can take it and they can make it destructive instead of having it give life to something. And we see at this time, the reason the Israelites are in the place that they're in right now is because they're doing the exact thing that God told them not to do. If you remember in the verse that we read for the first point, God is like, I have brought you out of slavery, and I've told you do not worship the gods of the Amalekites or of the Midianites. And they literally looked God in the eye, and they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, God, we're just going to build an altar. We're going to build an idol. And so when they did that, God took his favor away from the country and away from the people of Israel. But the reason that I say that the call requires destruction before creation is because a lot of times we have habits or we have strongholds in our life that are actually holding us back more than anything else. We talk so many times about what that looks like. It could be addiction. And now there are things that you can be addicted to. It could be video games. It could be to performance. It could be to how you look. It could be to how you don't want to seem to your friends. It can be really anything. But we can be so easily addicted to things. It could be depression and anxiety. We could be hooked to being inside of our own head and wanting to feel something, so we drown ourselves in our own pain. It can be anything, but we have to understand that sometimes we have to destroy the old in order to make room for the new. And actually, I want to take that back. You always have to destroy the old to make room for the new. I always think about it like this. If you have a rotten apple and you throw it in with a bunch of other apples, you know what's going to happen to the other apples? It's pretty obvious. They're going to become rotten as well. And so God is saying, hey, if I want to build something here, if I want to build something in your life, what you have to realize is that you have to get rid of everything that could kill the very thing that I am trying to build. And so he's saying to Gideon, he's saying, hey, Gideon, you have to get rid of the idols. You have to get rid of the things that are enslaving your family. You have to get rid of the things that are holding you guys back, because the only way that you're going to be able to go forward is if you're completely free. You see, God wants to use and he wants to enable every single part of our body. And our body isn't necessarily the physical thing, but it's the people around us. It is our support system. It is all of those things. And the best way that he can use the whole body is if it is completely free. If you guys have ever seen the NFL, if you guys have seen any kind of sporting event ever, when somebody's wearing a brace on their ankle or those big boots, guess what? They cannot help the team because they are not in the game. And that's the case for a lot of us in here today. We're living broken lives. We're living injured lives. And what we're doing is we're staying on the sidelines when God has called us to get inside and into the game. Because when you get into the game, you are better than just a regular player. You are a game changer. And that is what he had to help Gideon realize in this moment. He said, hey, Gideon, guess what? Before you met me, you had an old name. You had Gideon the youngest. You had Gideon the smallest. You had Gideon the person who we would risk his life the easiest. Or they didn't care about losing you to the Midianites. So they sent you into the wine press to go do a meaningless, menial job. But can I tell you something? In the meaningless, menial times, that is when God will come to you and change your name. When I went into the workforce, I was a paper filer. And then when I went back into a different job, I was a tech support at a senior center. And you know what God has changed my name to today? He has said, Jake, you are not a paper filer. Jake, you are not a tech support. You are called. You have created something at Emmanuel called One Youth. And guess what? Your name is on it. Your name is put onto this thing. And this is who you are called to be at this moment. And guess what? There's levels to God's plan. This is not where I'm going to be forever. And I want you guys to know that too, is where you're at. That is not where you're going to be stuck at. That's not where you're staying. God has called you to greater things. God has called you to better things. But in order to get there, we have to destroy the things that are holding us back. And as I'm saying this, you know exactly what it is for you. God wants to take those things, break them. Because if we never get to break the things that hold us back, we never get to experience the miracle that he has for us. And this brings me to my third and final point. And we jump ahead a whole chapter to Judges chapter 7. And I'm going to be reading verses 13 to 15, and then jump ahead to 22, 23, and 25. And so God speaks to Gideon, and he gives him this whole elaborate plan, and I will not get into it. But pretty much this is the plan to annihilate the Midianites and free Israel. Just like every judge has done before him, and just like every judge will do after him. And it says as we pick up, and I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when God tells me something, it's kind of hard to believe. Because I'm just like, did I just tell myself that in my head? Like, am I the only one on board with this? But this is the cool thing. Sometimes God will use the most unlikely people to confirm the things that we doubt the most. And we see it right here. It says, Gideon arrived to a camp, which is actually the Midianite camp. He was kind of spying, lurking. And he arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. I had a dream, he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. Do you guys know what Gideon was doing the last time what Gideon was doing the time he was called? He was rounding up barley. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, these are two enemies. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. And so Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, and he bowed down and worshiped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." And before we get to verse 22, I don't know about you guys, but isn't that crazy? God used literally the enemies of Israel to confirm the very thing that Gideon needed to hear. How many times would you expect confirmation to come out of the most unexpected places? I would have not expected that. I know in my life, like the places where I expect things the most, often they don't come. And can I tell you something? Expectation can often lead to disappointment. And so God does not want us to sit in expectation. He wants us to sit in the last thing that he has called us to do, and that is make disciples. That is love like Jesus did. That is be kind. That is forgive. That is, if you want to know what he has called us to do, look at Jesus' life in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and do exactly as Jesus did. And then we jump ahead to verse 22, and it says this. Gideon gathers his people together, and they have this whole plan. And there's only 300 men against thousands and thousands of men. But when God is in it, who can be against you? And so when the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused all of the men throughout the enemy camp to turn on each other with their swords. And the army fled to Beth Shedah toward Zerah as far as the border of Abel Mahola near Tabith. And this is what happened. The Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and Al-Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. And this is what happened. They captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. Such cool names, but they were bad guys, so it's ruined. It sucks now. But they killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, kind of ironic, and they killed Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. And they pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of the 2 leaders to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. And this is the last thing I want to talk to you guys about today, is that the call will always come with confirmation. The call will always come with confirmation. And I think about my senior year of high school, which we have some seniors in our youth group. I think we have like 12. And I know a lot of them, I would always hear them talking like, I don't know what's next. I don't know what God wants me to do. And I don't know all this. And I'm going to be straight up with you guys sometimes. Sometimes, I'm going to be straight up with you right now. Sometimes we don't always have a direct answer from God. Like, I don't wake up in the morning and I'm like, God, do you want me to put on my long socks today or my short socks? Which would make you happier? And I think God would say to me, he said, Jake, you know what? If you put on either pair of those socks, you're still going to glorify me today. So you pick. You have that choice. look at this story and we see confirmation come from the most wild place, out of the enemy camp. And I don't know about you, but I could see Gideon having 300 men. He's like, God, this is it. I got 300 boys, and they got like 10,000s and 10,000s. But God's like, okay, you don't believe me? You don't believe the one that has brought you this far? Go to the enemy camp and listen to them. And God used the enemy, and he gave the enemy a vision. And that is what convinced Gideon. But can I tell you this, man, whenever you're moving towards God's purpose for your life, you will always receive confirmation. I remember sitting at my desk at work at Workoa, which was the senior center, and that's where I was a tech advisor. God help me. And I remember getting a text from one of my buddies. He's like, hey, you might be getting a call from Pastor Mark soon. You might be. I was like, excuse me, what? He said, oh, they're looking for somebody to fill a role at Emmanuel, and they've searched around and they haven't really found anybody that's a good fit. And so he's just me calling you. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I met with Pastor Mark, and I got to talk to him, and we went to Rise Up. Shout out Rise Up Coffee. God bless your soul. It's the best on the Eastern Shore, maybe in the world. And I remember leaving that meeting feeling so excited. I remember leaving that meeting feeling so affirmed and confirmed, but that wasn't it. I got calls from 3 pivotal, essential people in my life. And I told them about my situation, and they said, Jake, that is exactly what you're supposed to do. That is exactly where you're supposed to go. I was like, that is so crazy. And I remember feeling that confirmation. I remember feeling that affirmation. And I just want to tell you guys today, is like, hey, you have a call waiting. You have somebody waiting on the other line, and as corny as it is, it's God. He has something designed specifically and only for you. And listen, we're coming out of this thing. There is going to be phase 2, maybe the next 2 weeks. Like, I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller, whatever it is. But when you come out, don't forget the call that you have on your life. Don't forget the person that you're supposed to be. Don't forget the example that you're supposed to set. And if you're like, I don't know what that is, I promise you it's to glorify God in everything you say, everything you do, everything you think. And man, so let's do that. This comeback culture, it's got to be set by remembering our call. This guy named John Gordon, who super famous like speaker, and he writes books and all this stuff. And he always says, a lot of times the reason people get burnt out from something is because they focus on what they're doing and they forget why they started doing it. Don't forget your why. Know your why. Know why you're here. Know why you're in that person's life. Know why you're in that family. And although it may seem unfair, God has you there for a reason. Let's pray. God, thank you for all my friends that are tuning in. God, thank you that we are starting to look on the up here, God, as we maybe hopefully return soon. God, I miss them. I love them. And God, you have a call on their life. God, you have a call, something special for each and every one of them. God, I pray that you confirm that in them today, that they feel something different than they have, maybe in this whole entire quarantine. God, we love you and we thank you. I pray that you go with them this week.